It's week 15, and you know what that means. It's fantasy playoff season. It'd be nice if you just had a quarterback and tight end you can set and forget, but a lot of us aren't in that situation. So, who do you start and who do you sit this week? Well, there still are a few must starts. If you got these guys, don't sweat it. Put them in your lineup. At quarterback, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and Jaden Daniels. At tight end, Trey McBride, Travis Kelce, George Kittle, and Brock Bowers. And before you set your lineup to help you win in the playoffs, don't forget to set your winning picks for Underdog. If you haven't tried Underdog yet, well, here's the winning pick. It's a free one. On Thursday night, Brock Purdy just getting 1 yard. That's right. If you sign up for the first time on Underdog, you get this free pick, Brock Purdy. Take higher than 0.5 total yards. Just make sure you use code ENDGAME when you sign up because you get the free pick and you still get a 50% deposit match, which gets you up to $1,000 worth of bonus cash. So in that Thursday night matchup, it's the Rams at the 49ers. Got two quarterbacks who came alive last week. Start with Matt Stafford for the Rams. He pretty much eviscerated the Bills defense. Can he do this on the road against the Niners?
He can, but I don't feel great about this. These teams, this is a division matchup. You know, the games are always competitive and tough. I know that was the Bills, and you think this isn't as good of a defense, but they did a pretty good job against Caleb. I'm going to say Matthew Stafford, barely just a streaming option this week.
Barely a streaming option. Well, okay. I also have him in the streaming tier because, yeah, this is not a great matchup for him. And look, I really hope you're not streaming at this point. You might be, but he's got Kupp, he's got Nacua. That always makes for a pretty high floor. And then Brock Purdy, again, also going against the defense that just gave up a ton. In fact, the most fantasy points ever by a quarterback. That's right, that's what the Rams gave up. But Brock Purdy isn't quite Josh Allen.
No, he's not Josh Allen. He's not going to run in 3 touchdowns. But at the same time, I'm not scared of this Rams defense. I think between the two, I do prefer Brock Purdy at home. But again, probably just a streaming option this week.
I think as far as streaming radar for QBs this week, again, no teams on bye this week. Not too many injuries to quarterbacks. I think Brock Purdy's still a strong streamer. On Sunday, we're going to have the Cowboys taking on the Panthers. So Cooper Rush, still the man for the Cowboys. How do you feel about him?
I don't feel terrible about him, but I also don't feel great. There's no quarterbacks on bye this week. We do have some injuries, but no like major injuries. Cooper Rush, barely 2 QB Superflex this week, only because it's Panthers.
Yeah, for what it's worth, give him credit. Rush is keeping the Cowboys competitive, and he's done a decent job. With all that said, that doesn't scream upside, right? So Superflex, I think he's fine as your second quarterback. Now at tight end, Jake Ferguson came back, but unfortunately, it looks like now he's kind of in a timeshare there as far as targets and everything with Luke Schoonmaker. So do you think Ferguson separates a little bit this week?
Maybe. This is very frustrating because it's another great matchup for him against the Panthers. But yeah, we did see Schoonmaker involved still. I do have my worries here, so I'm going to say Ferguson this week. Only a streaming option, but a high-end streamer because of the matchup.
Yeah, and still the Panthers, one of the absolute worst against tight ends, but you've got to wonder about target share here. So I think he's a streamer. Just hope that he gets more targets. And Bryce Young for the Panthers still continues to make progress, looking better. But that's in real life. Is there enough here for fantasy?
No, it's the Cowboys, so it's not the worst matchup. But again, kind of like Cooper Rush, barely 2 QB super flex.
Exactly. Until they get more playmakers in that offense, just the upside is capped. So super flex for the floor. Now we got the Chiefs at the Browns. These are two more exciting quarterbacks. Let's start with Pat Mahomes. Can't remember the last time we said he was a must start, but is he at least a strong start against this Browns D?
I don't think I can go that high. Just the upside hasn't been there. I know, it could turn into a shootout because of Browns games, but this Chiefs defense is so good it might not become a shootout. So I'm going to say Mahomes this week, only a streamer.
I'm going to put him in the solid tier. I mean, he's been coming along lately, and I do think that there could be more passing in this game. The Browns defense has not been that great, so he's solid this week. Travis Kelce, despite not having a great game, I mean, you should still roll with him at tight end. Could you consider Noah Gray if you don't have a Kelce?
No, this feels too desperate. I know it's the Browns, but still, you're really hoping for a touchdown here. I'm not doing it with Noah Gray this week.
Look, I know that some of you just stream tight ends from week to week and you have to pick and choose. Let's pick someone else this week. All right, and then there's famous Jameis. Predictably struggled against the Steelers, and now it's the Chiefs. Can't feel too much better.
Can't feel too much better, but the Chiefs actually have been vulnerable through the air, and Jameis Winston has this very strange, he's great one week and terrible the next, so maybe this is a great week. It's Jameis Winston. He's very risky. I'm going to say 2 QB Superflex only.
And he is at home, but still, man, do I want that risk in my lineup with the playoffs on the line? Not in a single QB league. So I won't say he's a streamer because there's other QBs I like better. Superflex only. That said, David Njoku continues to roll. I mean, you got to feel pretty good if you have him at tight end.
Yeah, Njoku has to be a strong start. Borderline must start.
There you go. Very strong start. And I really don't think Tillman being out is a factor here. I think Njoku is a strong start. Now, hopefully this video helps you with all your start-sit decisions, but if you still have questions for start-sit, waiver wire trades, or anything fantasy football related, use the Draft Lane app because that connects you directly with Chris and myself for all your fantasy football needs. Download it for free right now. Dolphins at Texans this week. I mean, Tua Tagovailoa has probably been the hottest quarterback, Josh Allen aside, of the past month. Does he keep it going here?
Why not? In Houston, in the Dome against his secondary, I think Tua's got to be a strong start this week.
Exactly. Very strong start. I don't know if we can say he's a great streamer because he's been picked up in so many leagues, but if he's still available, get him. If you have him, start him. Now, you knew it would happen. As soon as we put Jonnu Smith as a no doubt must start, he would come down to earth. But he still scored. He still was involved, at least in overtime.
Yeah, this is probably going to be the toughest decision of the week for me because he was such a beast for 3 straight games, and then he did nothing, literally nothing, for 60 minutes of football, and then went off in overtime. I have no idea what to make of Jonnu Smith this week. I'm just going to say solid start and take the easy way out.
Well, here's the thing. I think we got to look big picture. We can't let one kind of disappointing week overshadow what he had been done for the last several weeks in a row. Tua has been hot. This Texans defense is just kind of reeling. So I'll say he should be a strong start. How many tight ends do you really feel better about than him? Now, for Houston's side, CJ Stroud has not been rolling. Up until the bye, he's a guy who'd been struggling, turning the ball over, which is very uncharacteristic. Now he gets this Dolphins defense, which I understand they just gave up 300 yards to Aaron Rodgers randomly, but they still are technically the toughest against quarterbacks.
Yeah, I'm not playing CJ Stroud in a 1 QB league. No chance. If he goes off, oh well, too bad. He goes off on my waiver wire or my bench, but he's fine in 2 QB Superflex.
Right, there are enough bad quarterbacks that you could put him in a 2 QB league, but can't do it. This just does not look like the same guy. The Dolphins defense is still supposed to be good against the pass, despite last week. Tell you what, don't start CJ Stroud in a 1 QB league, but also let's go lower on the underdog pick of 250.5 yards. I just don't think he'll get there. He's a guy who's struggled to reach that threshold in a lot of games. The Dolphins give up fewer passing yards than that per game. And if you are new to underdog because you're signing up for the first time to get that free pick that I already mentioned with Brock Purdy, well, you can combine it with this pick and you have a great chance to win. Jets, Jaguars. So just mentioned Aaron Rodgers randomly having a big passing game against a tough pass defense, and now he gets the other Florida team, the Jaguars, who are actually a bad pass defense. Do we have to be in on Aaron Rodgers?
I'm not in on Aaron Rodgers in a 1 QB league. I mean, still only had 1 touchdown, still only got 17 fantasy points, even with that big game. I know it's the Jags, but it's also my season on the line here. 2 QB Superflex, fine, but not 1 QB.
I'm not going to risk the letdown game here for Rodgers, not doing it. And then there's Mac Jones getting this Jets defense in a home game.
No chance. 2 QB, 3 QB, whatever it is, no way am I starting Mac Jones.
Definitely agree with that. Again, reminder, if you're in a super flex league, you don't have to put a quarterback in that super flex position. And if Mac Jones is your only choice, I'm not doing it. Where does that leave tight end Evan Engram?
Cannot feel good about Evan Engram this week. I mean, there's tight ends I wouldn't start over him, but there's not a lot of tight ends I would start Evan Engram over. I'm going to avoid him if I can.
At this point in the season, you need upside. Jaguars are not scoring touchdowns. I don't feel it happening with Mac Jones at quarterback, and that's not going to change. So just going to avoid Evan Engram. Next up, we have the Commanders at the Saints. I mean, based on what he's done lately and based on this matchup, I think you can just roll with JD and be fine. What about Zach Ertz at tight end? I did say he was probably your best streaming option at tight end if you need to go there.
Yeah, he's been mostly good this entire season, and now it's the Saints. I think, yeah, definitely a high-end streaming option this week. Actually, I'm just going to say Zach Ertz is solid.
Yeah, I'm fine with that because if you're looking out there at the tight end landscape, still not a lot of great options. Zach Ertz isn't going to blow up necessarily, but I like him better than almost all the other tight ends that aren't the must-starts this week. Now, before we get to the Saints tight end, let's talk QB here, and we know Derek Carr is out. Looks like we're going to have the return of Spencer Rattler, who was semi-decent for a couple of games until he wasn't. So, do you think we see a better version of Rattler?
Against this improving Commanders defense, no chance. There's no league I would start Rattler in. I think I would start Mac Jones over Spencer Rattler.
Who does he even have to throw to? Olave gone, Taysom Hill gone. Everybody's hurt in that wide receiver core. This is the hardest no you can have. And so Juwan Johnson, the tight end there, had been coming on, but now with this mess at quarterback, can you consider him?
You can't feel good. He kind of feels like Evan Ingram now. Like, yeah, you think he should be good because he should get the targets, but his quarterbacks are going to be terrible. I'm going to avoid Juwan Johnson, unfortunately.
Yeah, which is disappointing because he's coming off of 2 solid games. Could have been a guy who made a splash down the stretch, but no, I think we have to just take him completely off the radar. The Ravens get to take on the Giants this week. So, Mark Andrews has been really tough to pin down from a week-to-week basis. What do you think he does against the Giants?
He's got touchdown upside at least. He's been scoring. He's been getting more involved. It's the Giants. I know they've been good against tight ends, but Juwan Johnson just had a nice game against them. I think Mark Andrews is still a solid start.
Yeah, look, even if the Ravens don't have to throw the ball that much this week, Andrews still has upside, so it feels about right to put him in that solid tier. And then the Giants are just going to continue to roll Drew Lock out there. I have a feeling I know where this is going, but what's your opinion on Drew Lock for fantasy purposes?
I will say, between Mac Jones, the Saints QB, I would put Drew Lock over both of them, but I'm still not starting them this week.
That's some high praise. No. Drew Lock is a complete non-factor here. I'm just going to say hard no, regardless of what league type you play in. Bengals at the Titans. You know you're good if you have Joe Burrow. What about the tight end Mike Gesicki? Also really hard to predict if he's even going to show up from game to game.
Yeah, I don't even want to try to predict it, so I'm just going to bench him.
Did nothing much against the Cowboys. Is he going to do anything much here? I don't know. I don't want to risk it. Let's just pass. And then Will Levis, quarterback for the Titans still, managed to do absolutely nothing against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, I did say that I think the Bengals defense at this point is worse than the Jaguars, but does that even matter for Levis?
It doesn't matter. What is the upside here for Levis? His good games are like 15 fantasy points. Like, even in 2 QB Superflex, you can do better than Will Levis this week, I hope.
Well, unfortunately, there are not that many more quarterbacks I feel better about. I guess just because of the matchup, I could say he's a super flex option. But again, just as a very slight floor play. All right, now we got the Patriots at the Cardinals coming off of their bye week. How do we view Drake May, the rookie?
He's okay. I don't want to start Drake May in a 1 QB league, even against this Cardinals defense. But I think at 2 QB Superflex, he's fine. Yeah,
I think he's settled into a rookie that's going to not take as many chances, which isn't really great for fantasy. He's fine. He's solid. You don't want that in a 1 QB league. Superflex is okay. Tight end Hunter Henry has continued to be involved. Unfortunately, Austin Hooper is also somewhat involved. So how high can you put Henry?
I'm not super high on Henry, but yeah, he has been getting involved. He at least has a floor. Not a lot of touchdown upside, but he at least has a floor. So I'll say a streaming option.
I'm going to put him at kind of low-end streamer this week. The Cardinals, for whatever reason, are pretty good against tight ends. This defense didn't look great last week, but not because of giving up points to a tight end or a slot receiver or anything. So I think Henry is fine, but uninspiring. And then there's the never-ending question of what does Kyler Murray deliver this week?
Yeah, I was probably too high on Kyler Murray last week. Some of those interceptions were just like, what are you doing, dude? Like, what are you seeing out there? But he's got upside. I think he's still startable in a 1 QB league, but only a streamer.
Yeah, it almost doesn't seem to matter the opponent, the situation, the week. What I just don't know what Kyler Murray thinks from week to week. He's not the worst, but again, we haven't seen those big games from a fantasy standpoint. So he's just a streamer also. The Colts at the Broncos. Can Anthony Richardson, with a week off to plan for this one, come up with a big game?
He could, because he's got that rushing upside. We're seeing him start to use his legs more, score rushing touchdowns again, but very risky against the Broncos. Again, I'm going to say a streaming option because he has upside, but there's risk.
And on the road against Denver, I know they looked bad against Jameis Winston a couple weeks ago. I really think they just kind of took that game for granted. But yeah, man, if you're starting Anthony Richardson in a 1 QB league in the playoffs, you are living dangerously. I'm not going to do it. I'll just say Superflex 2 QB only. I do feel much better about Bo Nix if he happens to be available. I think he should be against this Colts defense at home with a week to prepare. I think he should be a very good streaming option, maybe even a solid start.
I don't know if I can go as high as solid start. Wasn't great the last time we saw him. I mean, he wasn't terrible, but wasn't great. But again, yeah, I will say a streaming option because it is a good matchup.
Bills at the Lions. All right, so QB aside, for Buffalo, we got possibly Dalton Kincaid coming back. Still hasn't made his way back from injury. Even if he returns, is there any interest?
No interest in Dalton Kincaid.
I'm not doing it. Been done with him for weeks now. Dawson Knox maybe is a starter again if Kincaid is out, but is there enough here for him?
No, against the Lions, there's no teams on bye. We can do better than Dawson Knox.
I agree. Dawson Knox, just not enough upside here. All right, now quarterback for the Lions is, of course, Jared Goff. Going against this Bills defense seems like a tough task, but then you see what Stafford did last week. Do you think he could do the same?
I don't think so. I mean, he doesn't have a guy like Puka who you can just throw a screen to and just run it 20 yards for a touchdown or an end around or things like that. I know he was good last week, but he's mostly just kind of been okay. I'm going to say this week, Jared Goff, 2 QB Superflex only.
Agreed. Goff hasn't really had a big game himself for a while. Unfortunately, they have 2 really good running backs, and that's part of it. And the Bills' defense, as bad as they looked last week, really aren't a cupcake matchup for quarterbacks. So 2 QB only. And then there's Sam Laporta at tight end. I mean, I know he's not the tight end 1 or even a must start these days, but he's at least continuing to be involved. So what tier does he belong in?
He's only a streamer. He could score, but if he doesn't, you're not getting a whole lot. So streaming option.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Because again, this isn't a great matchup on paper. You never know exactly when he's going to appear or not appear. Don't want a guy who's too touchdown dependent. So I think he's at least a good streamer. All right, now let's talk Bucs at Chargers. Baker Mayfield coming off a nice game, but now it's a road matchup against the Chargers. How strongly do you feel about him?
Not as strongly as I felt last week, but I still think Baker Mayfield, because he runs a little bit, he's got weapons, is at least a solid start this week.
Agree. I think solid is fair for him. You know, it's not a great matchup per se, but Baker Mayfield, man, just give him credit. He's been consistent. He does have the element of running. He hasn't done as much lately, but he could. So I'm going to prefer him over some of those other pocket passers, but I think he's a very solid option. And at tight end, Cade Otton. I mean, his targets and receptions have definitely taken a dip since Evans came back, but he wound up somehow as the leading receiver in yardage for the Bucs last week. So where does he rank?
Just a streamer. The touchdown upside isn't really there. The targets aren't there. Yeah, just a streaming option.
Right. Very risky here. Not a great matchup. So he's a good streaming option, but just a streamer. And Justin Herbert, he's taken a step back. I know they didn't have Vlad McConkey last week, and we don't know if they'll have Vlad McConkey this week, but against this Bucs, does he rebound?
He should. He did get banged up in that game, so we'll have to see. And, of course, a big part of it is going to be Vlad McConkey. But this is a great matchup. That being said, I can only say Herbert, a solid start if he has Vlad.
Right. I mean, this very much depends on Ladd playing. If he doesn't, he's just a super flex option. Even if McConkey plays, despite the good matchup, I just don't feel the upside here. Again, we need somebody who could have a smash game. I don't know if Herbert is doing it these days. So I'm just going to say a streamer if McConkey is in. The Battle of Pennsylvania, the Steelers at the Eagles. Now, Russell Wilson not only has this tough matchup, but it sounds like he's going to be without George Pickens. How low do we go?
He was okay last week. Didn't rack up yards, of course, but he did throw 2 touchdowns, not really turning the ball over, but you can't feel good about him. No way I could start him in a 1 QB league, but 2 QB Superflex, he's fine.
I'll keep him in the super flex range just because, yeah, there are that many worse quarterbacks, but you cannot consider Russ in a single QB league as a streamer. Now, with that said, if Pickens is out, does that mean Pat Freiermuth gets a bump?
Maybe, but he's been pretty good lately, so I think he's got touchdown upside. I'm not going to say like solid or strong start for Muth, but I think he's one of the better streaming options.
He would be even higher if this wasn't such a tough matchup. The Eagles defense is legit. But you got to think they're going to have to get him involved in terms of more target share. They know ahead of time they're probably going to be without Pickens. So I'll put him in the solid tier. And the Eagles are going with Grant Calcaterra as Dallas Goedert's still on IR. So does Calcaterra have any fantasy relevance?
Scored a touchdown last week. Didn't do a whole lot else, but at least he did score a touchdown. But man, I barely feel good about A.J. Brown. Like, how good can I feel about Grant Calcaterra? It's the Steelers. Barely a streaming option.
Yeah, don't feel it this week. And again, he did something against the worst defense against tight ends in the Panthers. This is too risky. I'm just going to pass on Calcaterra. Packers and Seahawks, definitely going to be a competitive game. Let's start with Jordan Love at quarterback. Is there enough upside that he's at least a solid start?
I can't say he's solid. He's only a streaming option. I feel like the upside is there somewhere. We're just not seeing it. Barely a streaming option.
Yeah, you know what we're seeing? A lot of Josh Jacobs. He's scoring the touchdowns. He's carrying the way. So, again, we're not seeing a high enough ceiling here for fantasy. It's playoff time. You can take some chances. I'm going to put Jordan Love in the super flex range. Tight end Tucker Kraft does continue to be involved. Where do you put him?
Continues to score. Came through in a tough matchup last week. This matchup not nearly as tough. He's got touchdown upside. You can stream him.
Should be a very good streaming option if you need it. I've kind of been surprised he's still involved as a receiver here, even more so than some of the wide receivers and Jaden Reed. So, good streamer. And then for Seattle, got Geno Smith still at QB. How do you feel about him against the Packers?
I don't feel great. He's been okay lately. I think he's really missing DK Metcalf and those big plays that just aren't there right now. And the Packers, even though Jared Goff had a nice game against them, they are pretty good against QBs. I'm going to say Geno Smith 2 QB Superflex only.
Superflex range is pretty much where I feel Geno should live. Hasn't had any really big games either. This Packers defense is just an okay matchup. I guess Geno Smith is okay for Week 15. The first Monday night game is going to be the Bears at the Vikings. So we saw good Caleb Williams for 2 weeks, and then we saw the bad Caleb Williams again last week. On the road against the Vikings, what does he do?
Can't feel good about this. He did somehow throw 2 touchdowns to at least not kill you last week, but man, what is the upside here? The Vikings are still a good real-life defense. I'm going to say 2 QB Superflex only this week.
Well, on the one hand, the last time that these teams played, he had a big game, 340 yards, if we remember that. But on the other hand, we just don't know what we're getting from Caleb Williams from week to week in this Bears offense. So I'd say he's a streaming option. I still believe here the talent is there. I think they just ran into an angry Niners defense last week on the road. So I'm going to say you can stream him if you're willing to take the risk. And then Cole Kmet feels like he's taken a backseat to all 3 of these talented receivers here. So is there enough juice for him to be a starter in your fantasy team for the playoffs?
0 targets last week. I would definitely say that's a backseat. There is no way I'm putting Cole Kmet in.
One thing you don't want, I mean, sure, there's always risk in fantasy, but do you really want a chance of 0? Nah, don't do it. Now, you probably didn't think for the fantasy playoffs in 2024, before the year started, you'd be saying, and Sam Darnold might be the guy to lead you to the championship. But after last week, could Sam Darnold lead your team to a championship?
He could. He's mostly been good. They're at home this week. I mean, it is a tough Bears defense, despite what Brock Purdy just did. This still is a tough Bears defense. But man, Sam Darnold's been good. He's at home. I'm going to say Darnold is a strong start this week.
Cannot doubt the man who's throwing to Justin Jefferson, and now Jordan Addison is pretty much doing his best Jefferson impression. So, yeah, until he proves us wrong, let's say Darnold is a strong start. So where does that leave TJ Hawkinson, who I mean, he's playing third wheel behind those two receivers.
Yeah, he had those couple nice games when he first came back, and he's kind of been underwhelming since. But I still think I'm going to put him in the streaming tier at least.
Right, because he's in such a good offense. The Bears might have a better chance of taking away or at least limiting the wide receivers. So Hawkinson is at least streamable. And the final game of Week 15 will be the Falcons and the Raiders. So Kirk Cousins is barely holding on to his job, I would think, although he got a boost of confidence from his coach Raheem Morris, probably because of how much he's getting paid. Is there any way you can consider Kirk Cousins in fantasy?
Would I start him over Mac Jones? Would I start him over, Drew Lock? I don't know if I would. I mean, at least he's getting yards, but no way you can start this guy. No chance.
If you're in a 2 QB league, you need to start a second quarterback. Kirk Cousins isn't the worst still, because like you said, they're throwing the ball so much, so he's getting yards. Super flex, it would be super risky. But here's an easy one. Kyle Pitts. Just forget about it. Just forget it. Done.
I mean, we're not going to get sucked into this ever again, right? Done with Kyle Pitts.
And then for the Raiders, well, this is still up in the air. Just when it looked like Aiden O'Connell's season was over, now they're saying it's a bone bruise. So if O'Connell's playing on Monday night, what do you think?
I think if he's playing, you got to feel pretty good. I mean, it's the Falcons. They're terrible. I'm not going to say start this guy in a 1 QB league, but he's fine in a 2 QB Superflex.
Only because the Falcons defense has looked that bad lately, kind of trying to match the offense. Yeah, I think in a Superflex league, you could roll him out there. Now, if AOC does not go, it's revenge time. That's right, Desmond Ridder against the Falcons. Would you do it?
No, even against this terrible Falcons defense, no chance. Not even in Superflex.
No, definitely not. I think the revenge would be for the Falcons, not for Ridder. Now, if you didn't catch the running back and wide receiver start sit videos or everything else that we have to help you win for Week 15, it's all in this week's playlist.